Welcome to Fractional Focus, the Quickly Hire podcast where we spotlight exceptional fractional professionals who are helping businesses scale and thrive. I'm your host, Brad Morrison. Today we're joined by Tracy, a communications strategist with a PhD who transitioned from pastoral ministry to marketing. Alex specializes in crafting content that builds resilient customer relationships while helping clients express their authentic brand identity across multiple channels. I am joined today by Tracy, a marketing and communications expert. Hey, Alex, thanks for joining us on the show.
Glad to be here.
You have just a very unique background, a ton of breadth in your skill set, specifically with verbal and written communication. Tell us a little about your background and experience.
I'll give you the condensed version. So I have a background in organizational leadership, specifically in faith-based organizations. Yes, I served as a pastor for years and years, but I hold a PhD basically in organizational culture and communication, and using communication to shape organizational culture. So communication has always been at the heart of my work, even when that wasn't necessarily my job title. When we first met, which is going on a while now,
Many years ago.
I was actually serving in the role of external communications director, for lack of a better word. And then after that, I served for a number of years in sort of the executive director level role. But within that, communication, and especially external communication, was always my passion project. It was the thing that I probably spent more time than a lot of people wanted me to spend on that particular work. And because in the church setting, you often are working on tight budgets, and there's often not money for these kinds of things, you learn very quickly to not only be the communication strategist, you learn how to implement the strategy. Building the first websites for a couple of the churches that I served, implementing best practices for social media and making sure that was working properly, email lists and campaigns, but also within the broad strategy of how do we use communication to not only strengthen our internal relationships as a community, but also reach the community outside. So those external pieces of, for lack of a better word, public relations fell within my purview as well. So that's what I have been doing. And then when it came time for me to decide to leave pastoral ministry, because we had a changing family situation and we needed to be able to stay in one place. And within my faith tradition, pastors are moved a lot, and we just needed to be in one place for a while. And I decided it was time to leave that work, but keep that communications as my focus. And today, that is what I do. I have taken that passion project that had been sort of the back burner thing that had been an ongoing project for me, and I have made it the centerpiece of my day and my work. And it is something that I have loved because it is always new, it is always different. The strategic side of it feeds my desire to plan and make plans that work well and advance organizational goals. And then I also get to exercise my creativity by building websites, by doing visual branding, by writing copy and writing content pieces. And it also helps me develop relationships. You're developing relationships with media sometimes and working with folks as you're pitching projects and pitching clients to people to try and get that next level of coverage through earned media as well. So that's the nutshell version of how I got here.
I love your story. We've known each other a long time. I know one of the first projects that we worked together on was a website for the church that you were at and that I was a member of, and could see your passion for that even at that moment. You know, it's interesting with nonprofits and especially churches, I think. There's a part of that that the public sees, right? If it's a church, you know, maybe a Sunday morning 11 o'clock hour type thing, that this is what the public sees. But what they don't see is everything that goes into that to get people to come and the activities that you have and the financial component on and on, right? And you see that with a lot of nonprofits. You may see their big annual event they have, and it's fun and everyone participates and it raises money. But what you don't see is all of the work that goes in behind the scenes that are typical business functions. So it's really neat to get a little bit of insight into that and to see how you have taken that skill set that you had and developed in that profession and pulled it out into and applied it to others as well.
Yeah, I think, there's a joke in the church world that the pastor only works on Sundays. And I think that you can apply that to so many different creative worlds, and especially, like you mentioned, just nonprofits generally. But there are a number of places where you see the end result, you see the TED Talk, you see the annual report for the nonprofit, you see the ad in print, you see the beautiful website, whatever it may be, and you don't see all the layers of work that go into that. With a website, for instance, you're not just not seeing the back end and all the coding and all the things, or if you're using a visual builder, all of that that goes into it. You're not seeing the wireframing. You're not seeing the planning about how are we going to move people through a story here to move them to action, whatever that action needs to be. If it's volunteering in a nonprofit, if it's requesting a quote from a service, whatever it might be, you're not seeing that whole planning process, which can extend. That's the 90% of the iceberg that you don't see under the water. You see the beautiful finished product, but all of that planning and strategy that goes into it, and especially if you're talking about multi-channel communications across print, web, social media, all of those things, you just see a fraction of it, and you're not seeing this huge web that connects everything and that took months possibly of planning to make all those pieces fit together.
And you have conversion goals with that as well. It's not just for-profit businesses that have that. You also have that with nonprofits and churches as well.
Nonprofits got to make budget at the end of the year. Just
That's
like
right.
just like everybody else, the nonprofit has to also woo donors, and you can get volunteers depending on what their area is. And that takes the same kind of meticulous planning. All of these take a level of strategic thinking and planning I love. That is what feeds my energy, is to look at something and think, okay, how do we get from this starting point to a finished project that may be 6 months off? It might be a year off, but how are we going to get there? And then what are all the pieces that we can pull together to make that work and to get us there quickly, as efficiently as possible, but also producing something that's really, hopefully, eye-catching, that's worthy of attention, that says to people, we are to be taken seriously, not just because of our aesthetics of our website, perhaps, but also because we are clearly a force in the world. We are thoughtful, we are engaged, we are dynamic. All of those things can come together, but it takes time and strategy.
Yeah, I love the focus on messaging there, right? And I think, whether it's freelancers, consultants, a marketing agency, sometimes we think a little bit transactional. We have to build the website, we have to get the ads running. But before that, really thinking through who the target audience is, what should the messaging be? You helped us with our own case studies. And I know you also do comprehensive planning and strategy and campaigns for clients. But with us, we were very focused. We knew that we had kind of a weak point with our case studies that needed to be revamped, really tell the story and the successes that our clients have had using Quickly Hire. So could you speak a little bit to the process when you come in to a smaller project like that, and then how that might differ from a holistic campaign?
Yeah. So there's one thing that is key in both situations, and that is just you need to know the client's goals and objectives. That's always the starting point. Whether you're doing a multi-part, multi-channel campaign, or like you say, it's sort of the very specific, what is your end goal with this? In this case, like you say, I was working on one piece of what for your business is, a complete strategy that you've developed in-house that you're like, okay, this is our goal. And the main difference is, as a contractor in a particular slot like that, is figuring out, okay, now how does what I do fit into that without overtaking the whole? In that case, I have a very defined role, and that's good. That's appropriate. So thinking about how to, first of all, I remember we had some conversations about what your goals were and what you hoped to see out of your case studies, what you thought was missing and lacking. And then I took those case studies and I read every one of them on the website. I went through them all and made some notes about things that were just internal consistency, might be the right word for that. And then I went and looked at what your competitors were doing in the world and said, okay, these are sort of your main competitors in your vertical, and how do they stack up? What are they doing well? What are some things that, and I learned a lot about, boy, not everyone does everything well. And
True.
it came back with a draft of something and said, sort of, this is what I'm thinking. These are the things I would change. And in the case of the case studies, it was to streamline them significantly, to cut out a lot of verbiage and to remove some of the call outs that were breaking the flow of the story, so that the story side could come through of, this is what the client was dealing with. This is what we had to offer. This is how we put things together. And this is the end result. So just a basic, simple 3-4 part storyline, and then fill in some of the other things with the graphics and whatnot. And you had a great web designer who helped organize the visuals around it. But that process is still the same process that you would use in any size campaign, whether you're, like I say, talking about one specific slice or whether you're doing a whole campaign. It all starts with, what is our end goal? And then thinking about, for lack of a better word, the user experience. We use that a lot when we're talking about apps or when we're talking about websites, but user experience is something that applies to everything from communications. How are people engaging with our content? How are people engaging with this material we're putting out? And how do we move them from point A through points B, C, and D, where they have to make these micro decisions about, do I take the next step, whatever that may be? And then ultimately, when they hopefully click that button, submit the form, send a donation, whatever it might be, to say, this is the action we want to have at the end of it.
That's great. The approach you took with our case studies, it wasn't just copy. It wasn't just design. It wasn't just story. It was a little bit of all of that, which was neat. I also love when we can bring in, one of our own quickly hire pros and seamlessly work with our internal team. That's an important thing. And sometimes when you have freelancing or contractor or fractional relationships break down, it's because they're not able to seamlessly work with the team. Could you speak a little bit about your approach to communication with others so that they don't feel threatened or toes being stepped on? It's an important part of this business.
It depends a lot on the role that I'm in within a given project. I'm working with a client right now who basically said, I just need help. I need the mental load taken off, and I need somebody who can just take this and run with it and just keep me in the loop, ask me for approval for the big things, but you're going to be developing the strategy and implementing it, and you don't have to ask my permission for every little thing. That's a client situation where it's very hands off and it's just help. I don't want to have to think about this. And that is, again, just a piece of kind of figuring out what the client needs. And in this case, I'm going to be working with this client on a number of things over the next several months. And that will be a very different sort of situation from the one where I might be part of a team. I've done that too. I have been on a staff where we had multiple program areas and mine was one piece of the puzzle. And for that, the trick is really being aware. I think having there's a certain level of self-awareness that you just need to say, in this context, this is my lane. And it's a big lane. It's a 6-lane highway. In this context, this is my lane, single lane. And that's just a piece of that to be aware of. And the best way to maintain that is just through ongoing clear communication. I think you just have to be very clear up front about getting from the client a sense of this is what we need, and just realizing that you are not necessarily hired to solve every problem for every client. They may have other people working on projects. There is, I think, a place for clear and proactive communication when you're part of a network of a team to say, this is what I'm working on. Is this going to impact what you're doing? Is this going to have negative impact or positive impact? Help me figure out how these pieces fit together. And that is just a piece of being proactive communicator and saying, I know what my role is, but I also recognize that everything is connected. And I'm not responsible for all the strands of the web, but any vibration on this strand is going to cause others to vibrate as well. And I want to be aware of how I'm moving within that space. And you just get that by asking, what are you working on? Is this going to be connected with what you're doing specifically? Is it going to be tangential? Is it really kind of 3 steps removed and I'm not going to have to worry as much about it? But it's proactive asking and listening.
Thanks for that insight. It's great. Something that we hear a lot of from clients is they're always impressed that our pros are able to come in and do execution of small tasks sometimes that are assigned, but also be able to freely float into the strategy space and be able to help with bigger issues and take a comprehensive approach. So, we like to say we have strategic expertise and also specialist. So from leadership to specialist, we have pros that can come in. And in a lot of cases, it's one pro that can kind of do both of those, which is a very valuable, as a founder, that's an incredible skill set to be able to bring into the organization, because there are times where it's just the task that needs to be executed or a series of tasks. But then there are other times where you want more than that. You don't want to have to, spoon feed or assign every individual task. You want someone that has the background and expertise to be able to suggest an approach.
Yeah, thinking about sort of that relationship between specialist and strategy or generalist, I think that for many people in the creative world, yes, there are people who are just really specialists in one area. But even with folks who would say, I'm really kind of hyper specialized in one role or another, they usually have a whole outer circle of things that they can still do, even if that is not their bread and butter specialty. But there is a place for that broader sort of generalist. There's the old saying, jack of all trades, master of none. But what we often leave off of it is the second part of it, but oftentimes better than a master of one. So the idea that sometimes, especially for small businesses, small, medium-sized businesses, solopreneurs, nonprofits, places where you're dealing with a tight budget, you might not be able to put together a team of 5 or 6 specialists, because if you want to really find someone who's like, I want an SEO specialist, I want a web design specialist, I want a social media marketing specialist, a search engine marketing specialist, and I want someone who's going to do the press releases and the pitches for me, you're talking about a marketing department at that point. And what I think there are professionals like me who can come in and we can morph to fit the different roles in some places. Yes, there are things that I am probably better at than other specialists. There are specialists who are better at some things than I am. I know that. But there's also something to be said, I think, for the one-stop shop, the place where, okay, this is someone who can integrate all of these things. We have this term we call in the communications world, integrated marketing. How you take all of these different places, all of these different channels, your website, socials, all of those things, and you put them together with a consistent goal and tone and voice and message. And that is a kind of specialty in itself, even if it is not necessarily a specialty that has the same technical side as like, a web designer. You know, I've built multiple websites for organizations and for businesses. You know, I don't work with every web platform, right? A lot of folks will specialize in, I'm a WordPress builder, I'm a Squarespace builder, I'm a Webflow builder, I'm a Wix or Shopify, whatever it might be. It's okay to have specialties. And it's also, like you say, it's good to be able to zoom out and say, here's the view from 30,000 feet. And this is how it's all going to work together. And sometimes we move between those roles within the same project. It just depends on the needs at the moment.
Alex, can you tell us some advantages of being a part of the Quickly Hired network?
I think there are two big ones that come to mind just right off. One of them is that because I am part of a network and you have people on your team who are working to connect clients with contractors, that's a piece I don't have to worry about as much. I get to spend more time actually working on my own projects. When I was writing the case studies, one of the things that came out a lot was clients saying, I was working too much on the business and didn't have enough time to work on building the business. As a contractor and a freelancer of sorts, I have the reverse thing with working with Quickly Hire, where I now don't have to spend as much time working on building my client base because you help me with that. That helps to take a load off, and I can actually spend more time doing actual productive, engaging work that fulfills me. And the other piece of it is I do have clients outside of Quickly Hire, but sometimes I might have two big clients, but I want to fill in some of the rest of the time in my week. And that might be smaller roles that I don't necessarily want to go chase down on my own again, all of the possibilities, but it helps to fill out for me as a contractor, helps to fill out my week and my month so that I have as many of those hours filled in as I can with something that is bringing in income and helping me to make my own revenue at the end of the day.
Knowing you have such a breadth and broad range of experience and skills, if you were to say, this is my ideal engagement, maybe it's type of customer, but also the types of marketing and communications tasks that you would be helping with.
I think that the hub of what I do is really within the content sphere. It is how do we express this organization's identity through content? So whether that is through copywriting for the website, whether it's case studies, whatever it might be, that I think has always, in a way, and you heard me communicate enough, you probably could speak to this as well. I like to think that that's kind of the backbone, and all the other pieces sort of hang on that for me, is that sort of how do we communicate content wise? And then within that, so just an example of what I'm doing with a client right now, this client is a local creative firm, and they are wanting to grow their business, but also move into a new vertical. They want to go into a new vertical, and they don't have portfolio pieces necessarily to fill that. So yes, I am working on SEO for them for their website. I am working on content. We're going to be adding blog posts. I'm going to be doing Google AdWords campaigns. But all of that is based around the content of how do we position this client as knowledgeable about something that they don't necessarily have in their portfolio, but it's right next to what they do. So we'll be doing some content generation, but on that content backbone, you've got the little piece of the SEO, and the keyword research we do for the SEO will feed that content. And that's going to help make that work. That will also feed into our Google AdWords campaigns. But for me, a client who wants to say, how do I express clearly who I am as an organization, as a solopreneur, as a business, whatever it may be? How do I get that out there? And how do I build not just conversions? It's very easy. I'm a numbers person. I like to see the charts and the graphs, but I also think that we, especially in today's brand world and the world of communications, a conversion is not enough anymore. You need to be building loyal, resilient relationships through your communications and through your marketing. And that is something that takes time, but a client who recognizes that reality of, yes, I want to meet some KPIs very, very soon. But I'm also in this recognizing that this is not a quick thing. It is an ongoing process and it may take time. And time is okay because the result is a stronger, more resilient relationship with your audience, with your clients, with your donors, whatever that may be. I like to work with people who are in it for the long haul and in it to build real relationships. I think we have too many things these days that are just flash in the pan, here, gone, and it looks neat, but it doesn't have the meat to last through economic uncertainties and all the things that are sort of a part of our daily lives in business and in the world. We need strong relationships with our clients and audiences to make it through those.
And there's so much noise out there. Potential customers are just being barraged every day, not just competitors, but just so much. It's mentally exhausting. And so when you break through and you are able to build that relationship, I mean, you can have it results in brand ambassadors. It results in people that refer other people. It results in repeat customers, and community is a part of that as well. I mean, I see it in our world. You have people that come in as a customer, they then become an affiliate or a partner, and then they're an ambassador in the community that has even a closer relationship. Alex, one unique thing about you is that you have a PhD. Can you talk a little bit about how that impacts the work that you do?
Yeah, so when I say what my PhD is actually in, nobody knows what I mean when I say what my field actually is. So I usually just say that my PhD is in organizational culture and communication. And how do we use communication to shape organizational culture, especially within faith-based nonprofits and churches? Boy, you learn so much in the process of doing a PhD. I learned project management. Oh, so much project management because you are trying to carry a project through from initial planning to through your research, through the writing. And for me, in no small part because of the timing around some family moves, I wrote my dissertation while I was full-time working as a pastor and a new father in a new city. One of the big things that I brought from that side of it was just time management, project management, making sure you're meeting the deadlines, and also, yeah, you're writing. You write a lot, and you're writing not just for academics, but for different audiences. One of the things that was involved in my work was actually qualitative research models and using that for audience analysis. So doing interviews with folks. What do you listen for? What are you hearing? What sorts of things move you to action? And that's something that in an informal way, I think I still carry into my work because I'm interested in what makes people take certain actions based on what they hear and see.
Let's talk about some personal things now. What does Alex enjoy doing in his spare time?
I am a total nerd at heart. I am a total geek. I own it. I claim it. And my geekery shows in multiple ways. I play Magic the Gathering every week, just about on Friday nights. I have a group of folks, we get together and we play Magic for a couple of hours. I'm sure that has something to do with strategy and all those things. I can't get away from it even there. My wife and we're about to hit our almost 1000th streak in the New York Times crossword. We are always out to beat our best, which currently is 2 minutes 55 seconds on a Monday crossword for the New York Times. And then I've got two great kids and just shuttling them back and forth to where they need to be and keeping up with them keeps me busy, and trying to help engage them with their hobbies and their fun things, whatever that may be this given day. And it changes regularly. Those are things that I enjoy a lot. And especially now that where I am, I'm in the Atlanta area. It's spring, it's beautiful weather, getting out with the family and going for hikes and things like that at some of the state parks. So,
So lightning round, just some quick things that come to your mind immediately. What's your favorite place that you've lived?
ooh, it's probably Savannah, Georgia, just because Savannah's beautiful. I like the Atlanta area for a very different reason. It is a good place between my wife's family and my family. So there's that side of it. But If it were just me and there were no external factors to consider, yeah, Savannah.
Savannah's such a beautiful town. That's where you and I met. I live there as well. It's great. But there are different seasons to life and completely understand at times, being around family. And Atlanta's not a bad place either. I've lived there as well. And so I know firsthand, especially this time of year. Favorite book that you've read recently?
Oh, that I read recently. I reread The Lord of the Rings for about the 25th time. Does that count?
That counts.
Yeah, and after that, a book by Rowan Williams, who is the former Archbishop of Canterbury, a collection of his sermons.
What's some advice you would give someone looking to do contract work in the way that you're doing it?
It does not matter what your background is. You have some kind of a transferable skill to bring into whatever field you are looking to move into. It might not be the only skill that you need, but you do not have to set aside everything that you brought and everything that got you to where you are if you are making a change in career that involves moving into this kind of contracting fractional role. My career change has been a massive change, but there are pieces of it that I have brought with me into this new role. And key thing is figuring out, what do I bring? And also, what do I want? Do I want to have ongoing client relationships with folks that might be long term? Do I like the thrill of moving from project to project very quickly? Those are two things to think about. Sort of, what do I bring and what do I want?
Great advice. Fantastic. Okay, that was professional. So let's go two more personal. Favorite band or musician?
How about favorite album?
There you go.
Miles Davis's Kind of Blue, hands down. Best album ever recorded. John Coltrane, Miles Davis, Cannonball Adderley, Bill Evans is the single greatest gathering of musical talent, I think, in history.
Jazz, primarily your go-to?
Jazz, 80s and 90s alternative, as well as a lot of video game music. Nobuo Uematsu, who did the compositions for most of the Final Fantasy games. I have a number of his stuff on a playlist in my Spotify as well. And my son's very much into Metallica right now, so I'm listening to a lot of that.
Yes, I'm familiar with that. We listen to a lot of what our kids listen to. So, all right, final question. Favorite wedding that you've officiated?
Well, yours, of course.
That's the right answer.
And it was neat because I got special dispensation, if I remember, from the Catholic bishop of the Savannah area in order to be able to officiate at your wedding. And it was myself and a Catholic priest, and of course, as a United Methodist. And it was a great service. I loved that service.
Well, we did as well, and appreciate you and your family so much. Thank you so much for joining us. You are extremely talented. We've enjoyed working with you, and you're also a dear friend. So I appreciate the time to come and share your experience and advice on the show today.
Thanks, Brad. It's been great talking with you, and look forward to connecting with folks through the Quickly Hire platform and continuing to work with y'all.
If you need a talented marketing specialist, Alex is your guy. Reach out. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Fractional Focus. If you're a skilled professional looking to build your fractional career, or a founder seeking top-tier talent without the full-time commitment, visit quicklyhire.com today. Subscribe for more conversations with exceptional professionals who are redefining the future of work.